Hello everyone, and welcome back. Before we begin today's story, we would love to ask one small favor. If you enjoy emotional boys' love stories filled with unforgettable romance, heartfelt healing, and breathtaking twists, please subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Your support allows us to continue bringing these cinematic journeys to life. Now, tell us in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. We always love seeing how far our stories travel. And now, let us begin. The cruelest thing love can do is return wearing a face you were never supposed to notice. I used to believe the hardest part of heartbreak was watching the person you loved choose someone else. I was wrong. The hardest part was discovering that your real story had been quietly waiting beside you all along, while you spent years mourning the wrong ending. My name is Adrian Hale, and the day I attended my former boyfriend's wedding, I expected to bury the last piece of my past. Instead, I unknowingly walked into the first chapter of my future. 5 years before I attended my former boyfriend's wedding, I met a man whose name I never expected to hear again. At the time, I was 24, working as a junior graphic designer in Boston while spending most weekends volunteering at charity events. One snowy December evening, the Harbor Museum hosted its annual scholarship gala for students from low-income families. My assignment was simple: register guests, answer questions, and help wherever I was needed. Near the end of the event, a nervous college student was falsely accused of stealing an expensive watch. Most people stepped aside, unwilling to challenge a wealthy donor. I did not. I asked security to search the room before making accusations, and within minutes the watch was found inside the donor's own overcoat. The student kept thanking me, but I only smiled and told him that protecting someone's dignity was always worth a few uncomfortable moments. I assumed everyone had already forgotten the incident. What I did not realize was that someone had quietly watched the entire exchange from across the ballroom. His name was Colonel Lucian Ashford, decorated Air Force officer, keynote speaker, the kind of man people admired before he even entered a room. Later that night, after the guests had gone home, I stayed behind to help an elderly volunteer move heavy donation boxes into storage. As I struggled with the last stack, another pair of hands reached for the opposite side. It was Lucian. We carried the remaining boxes together in comfortable silence until the room was empty. Before leaving, he asked why I had stayed when nobody would have blamed me for going home. I answered without thinking. Kindness only means something when it costs you time. He looked at me for a long moment, as though those words had unsettled something deep inside him. We shook hands once before walking in opposite directions. I believed that would be the end of our story. I never knew Lucian returned to the museum days later looking for me. By then, my mother had been diagnosed with cancer. I left my apartment, resigned from the volunteer program, changed jobs, and disappeared from every place where he thought he might find me. For nearly a year, he searched through scholarship organizers, former volunteers, and old business contacts before duty sent him overseas. The only thing he kept was the volunteer badge someone had accidentally left behind that winter night. Whenever difficult decisions threatened to make ambition more important than compassion, he opened the drawer of his desk, looked at that faded badge, and remembered the stranger who had quietly reminded him what real leadership looked like. 5 years later, fate finally crossed our paths again. Unfortunately, it happened on the one day I wished no miracle would ever find me. The invitation in my hand bore the name of the man who had once promised to spend his life with me, Mason Grant, my former boyfriend, and I was about to attend his wedding. I told myself I was only there to close an old chapter. I had no idea the groom's best man had already spent 5 years hoping for another chance to meet me again. Mason's wedding took place at Ashcroft Estate, a restored manor outside Boston surrounded by maple trees, glowing red and gold beneath the autumn sun. The moment I stepped through the entrance, familiar faces offered careful smiles, as though everyone had already decided I was either incredibly brave or quietly falling apart. I ignored the sympathy and reminded myself why I had come. I would congratulate Mason, survive the ceremony, and leave with the past finally behind me. Then the room shifted. Guests turned toward the chapel entrance as the best man arrived. Lucian Ashford wore a charcoal suit with the same disciplined precision I remembered from his military uniform. But it was not his height or reputation that held everyone's attention. It was the way people instinctively trusted him. He helped Mason's grandmother down the steps, calmed a nervous flower girl, corrected a seating mistake before the wedding planner noticed, and reassured the groom with only a few quiet words. Someone near me laughed and called him the alpha best man, the man who could rescue any wedding before anyone realized it needed saving. The title suited him perfectly. Then Lucian looked across the chapel and saw me. For one suspended second, his composure disappeared. Recognition flashed through his eyes so clearly that my heartbeat stumbled. He gave me a small nod, respectful and almost disbelieving, before turning back toward the altar. 5 years had passed, yet he remembered me instantly. The ceremony began, and I forced myself to watch Mason exchange vows with another man. To my surprise, the pain was quieter than I expected. It felt less like losing him again, and more like finally accepting that he had already gone. Lucian remained beside him throughout the ceremony, handling every small problem with calm authority. When the marriage certificate went missing, he produced a backup. When a flower arrangement collapsed, he repaired it without interrupting the photographs. When an elderly guest became unsteady, he crossed the room before anyone else reacted. By the reception, everyone was repeating the same nickname with admiration. Alpha Best Man Guardian. The man who never let anything fall apart. I slipped onto the terrace for air, hoping for a few minutes alone. Instead, I heard a familiar voice behind me. Boston still has the same stubborn wind. I turned and found Lucian standing several feet away, giving me space. Up close, he looked older, steadier, and somehow more dangerous to my peace than the officer I remembered. "You recognized me," I said. "Immediately," he answered. Then he reached inside his jacket and removed a faded volunteer badge sealed inside a clear sleeve. My photograph stared back at me from 5 years earlier. "I kept this because it was the only proof I had that meeting you was real." I could barely speak. "You searched for me?" "For almost a year." Before he could explain, one of Mason's relatives rushed onto the terrace in panic. The transportation company had sent the wrong shuttle for several elderly guests. Lucian slipped the badge away and answered with complete calm. "Give me 10 minutes. No one will be left behind." The relative hurried off, visibly relieved. Lucian looked back at me. "I owe you the truth. You do not owe me anything." His expression softened. "I have owed you that truth for 5 years. Then he returned to the reception, leaving me alone with the first real question of the night. Why had the alpha best man spent years searching for the man his best friend had once chosen to leave behind? The reception settled into a warm rhythm of music, laughter, and celebration, but Lucian never truly stopped being the alpha best man. Every few minutes someone needed him. A nervous waiter dropped an entire tray of champagne glasses, and Lucian quietly redirected guests before anyone was injured. Mason's grandmother became tired, and he personally arranged a comfortable room where she could rest. When the wedding planner discovered rain might interrupt the outdoor fireworks, Lucian calmly reorganized the evening schedule in less than 10 minutes. He never acted like the most important person in the room. Somehow, that was exactly why everyone trusted him. Nearly an hour later, he finally found me again beside the garden overlooking the lake. "I was beginning to think your job description included solving every problem in Massachusetts," I joked. He laughed softly. "Only the ones that happen on my best friend's wedding day." The conversation felt unexpectedly easy, but it changed the moment he asked, "What happened after the museum?" I hesitated before answering honestly. "My mother became seriously ill." Everything else disappeared. Sympathy crossed his face, followed by unmistakable regret. I looked everywhere I could think of. I shook my head gently. "You were searching for someone who no longer existed." Lucian remained silent for several seconds before speaking with unusual honesty. "No, I was searching for the same man I met that night. I simply hoped life had been kind to him." Before I could respond, Mason approached carrying 2 glasses of champagne. His smile was friendly, but his eyes moved curiously between us. "I never knew you two had met before today," he admitted. Lucian answered without hesitation. 5 years ago." Mason looked genuinely surprised. "You never told me." "Because I believed I would never see Adrian again." That single sentence changed the atmosphere. Mason knew Lucian better than almost anyone. He also knew Lucian never spoke carelessly about people who mattered. For the first time that evening, I noticed uncertainty flicker across my former boyfriend's face. After he walked away, Lucian turned back toward me. 5 years ago, I wanted to ask whether we could stay in touch." He smiled faintly. "I was too late." I looked toward the lights reflecting across the lake. And today I finally had the courage to ask. He met my eyes with quiet certainty. Would you allow me to know you better? My heart tightened unexpectedly. Every instinct told me he was sincere, yet another part of me still carried the weight of a love that had only recently ended. I took a slow breath before answering. Lucian, I am not ready to begin another relationship. Instead of disappointment, understanding appeared in his eyes. Then I will not ask for one. I need time. He nodded immediately. Then take all the time you need. I frowned slightly. You are not going to convince me? A warm smile crossed his face. No. Feelings that have to be argued into existence rarely last. His answer caught me completely off guard. There was no pressure. No dramatic confession. No promise that he would wait forever. Only quiet respect. Before returning to the ballroom, he said one final sentence. If life chooses to cross our paths again naturally, I hope you will give me another conversation. Then he walked away, leaving me standing alone beneath the evening sky. I believed the wedding had finally reached its ending. I had no way of knowing that only 3 weeks later, fate would place both of us in the same room again. And this time, walking away would become far more difficult. 3 weeks later, my design studio advanced to the final presentation for the East Harbor Community Education Initiative, one of the largest nonprofit education projects in New England. Winning the contract would change our small company forever. We spent days refining every detail, convinced we were competing against agencies with far greater resources. When presentation day arrived, representatives from schools, scholarship foundations, and community organizations filled the conference hall overlooking Boston Harbor. We presented last. Instead of focusing on logos and publicity, I spoke about creating spaces where children would feel they belonged before they ever achieved success. When the final slide disappeared, the room fell unexpectedly quiet. The committee thanked every team and asked us to wait outside while they reached a decision. Nearly an hour later, we were invited back inside. This time another figure had joined the panel. Lucian Ashford. He was not there as the project's owner or investor. The committee chair explained that several nonprofit organizations had unanimously appointed him as an independent reviewer because he had not seen any proposal beforehand and had no authority to select a winner on his own. Relief washed over me. Whatever happened today, no one could honestly claim he had arranged this meeting. Lucian greeted every finalist with the same professionalism before asking only one question. Which proposal will still matter to these children 20 years from now? Several agencies answered with polished business language about visibility, branding, and measurable impact. When my turn came, I answered. From instinct. If they remember the sponsor instead of believing in themselves, we have failed. Lucian lowered his pen without writing another note. He thanked every team equally and formally ended the session. There was no private conversation, no lingering glance, no special treatment. 2 days later, our studio received the news. We had won. The celebration lasted less than 24 hours. By the following morning, an online article questioned whether the competition had truly been impartial after photographs surfaced showing Lucian and me speaking together at Mason's wedding. Within hours, social media exploded with accusations. Some claimed I had manipulated the selection process. Others insisted Lucian had abused his influence to reward someone he secretly favored. None of it was true, but rumors spread faster than facts. That evening, Lucian called for the first time since the wedding. The committee will release every voting record tomorrow, he said calmly. Your team deserves complete transparency. I believed him. What frightened me was not the investigation. It was the damage gossip could leave behind long after the truth appeared. Please do not come see me, I whispered. People are already saying enough. A brief silence followed before he answered. If distance is what helps you breathe, I will respect it. He never argued. He never asked me to trust him blindly. The next day, every score, every vote, and every independent audit proved the selection process had been completely fair. The rumors collapsed almost immediately. I thought the worst was over until I accidentally overheard 2 executives leaving the press conference. Poor Lucian, one of them said. He is probably helping that young designer because he still feels guilty for never finding him years ago. The other nodded. Exactly. That is not love. That is regret. The word struck harder than any headline. Had I misunderstood everything? Was every kind gesture simply an attempt to erase an old mistake? Instead of asking Lucian directly, I made the cowardly choice. I sent him a short message thanking him for everything and explaining that we should stop seeing each other before. Gratitude became confusion. His reply arrived less than a minute later. It contained only one sentence. If walking away is truly your choice, I will accept it, but I cannot let you believe a lie about why I searched for you. I never answered. 4 days later, someone else appeared outside my studio carrying 2 cups of coffee. It was Mason, and judging by the look on his face, he knew the truth I had been too afraid to hear. Mason handed me one of the coffees before we started walking through a quiet park a few blocks from my studio. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Finally, he broke the silence. Lucian never asked me to come, he said. He would probably be upset if he knew I was here. I looked at him in surprise. Then why are you? Mason smiled sadly. Because I think you are about to make the same mistake I made. The words caught me off guard. He stopped beneath a row of maple trees and looked at me with complete sincerity. Do you know the first thing Lucian asked after I told him I was getting married? I shook my head. He asked whether the guest named Adrian Hale was the same Adrian he had spent years trying to find. My heartbeat quickened. Then he asked one more question. Mason paused. He wanted to know whether you looked happy. Not whether you were single. Not whether he still had a chance. Only whether you looked happy. I lowered my eyes, suddenly remembering every quiet decision Lucian had made since the wedding. He never chased me. Never used his position to impress me. Never asked for anything I was not ready to give. Mason continued gently. I have known him for more than a decade. If Lucian feels guilty, he apologizes once and moves on. What kept him searching for you was never guilt. Then what was it? I asked. Mason smiled faintly. Hope. Those simple words shattered the misunderstanding I had been carrying for days. That evening I drove to Harbor Museum without really knowing why. The building was closed, but the security guard recognized my volunteer badge and allowed me to wait inside the entrance hall where everything had begun 5 years earlier. Less than 20 minutes later, another car pulled into the parking lot. Lucian stepped inside, looking genuinely surprised to see me there. Your message sounded important, he said quietly. I took a deep breath. I owe you an apology. He shook his head before I could continue. You do not owe me anything. I overheard people saying you only helped me because you felt guilty. For the first time since we met again, real pain crossed his face. Is that truly what you believed? I nodded. Lucian looked around the empty museum before answering. Adrian, if guilt had been the reason, I would have stopped searching years ago. Guilt fades when time passes. Hope does not. Silence filled the hall where we had first met. I searched because I admired the man who defended a stranger when everyone else stayed silent. I searched because I wanted to know whether someone like that still existed. When I saw you at the wedding, I was grateful simply because life had given me one more conversation. His voice remained calm, but every word carried quiet conviction. If you had walked away after that wedding and never spoken to me again, I still would have considered myself fortunate. At least I would have known you were alive and hopefully happy. My chest tightened. You never expected anything in return? A gentle smile appeared on his face. Real affection is not a transaction. I laughed softly through the emotion building in my throat. You make it very difficult to keep misunderstanding you. He smiled back. That is encouraging. We both laughed, and for the first time since the rumors began, the heaviness between us disappeared. As we walked toward the museum exit together, my phone suddenly vibrated. A news notification appeared on the screen. Someone had secretly photographed Lucian and me leaving the museum side by side. Within minutes, the image had already begun spreading across social media. Neither of us realized that by sunrise, the entire city would be convinced Boston's most respected former military officer had fallen in love with the wrong man. And this time, walking away would no longer protect either of us. 2 days later, the studio erupted. The official letter arrived at 9:14 a.m., confirming we had won the East Harbor Community Education Initiative. For a second, no one moved, then chaos. Someone screamed. Chairs scraped. A stack of design drafts got knocked to the floor. My creative director actually laughed out loud, something I had never heard from him before. Pizza on me, he declared. By noon, the office smelled like melted cheese and cheap celebration cider. Someone turned the conference room into a makeshift party space. Even the interns were crying and laughing at the same time. And for once, I didn't feel like I was watching my life from the outside. I felt proud, not compared to anyone, not measured against anyone, just proud. That feeling lasted exactly 12 hours. The next morning, I stopped for coffee before work and saw my name trending on a local business news site. At first, I thought it was another congratulatory mention. It wasn't. An anonymous opinion piece had been published overnight. No direct accusations. No names. Just carefully planted poison. It suggested the selection process might not have been entirely impartial. It mentioned a surprisingly personal connection between the winning designer and the committee chairman, referencing a wedding, a private conversation, a coincidence twisted into implication. By the time I reached the studio, it had already spread. Social media didn't ask questions. It decided answers. He slept his way to the top. She used influence. The chairman clearly rigged it. None of it was true. But truth was no longer in control of the story. By noon, reporters were calling. By afternoon, our studio's inbox was flooded. My creative director tried to hold the team together, insisting the committee would release full documentation. But I could already feel it, something worse than professional damage. Reputation doesn't just break. It stains. That evening, my phone rang. Lucian. His name alone made my chest tighten. I answered. I assume you've seen it, he said quietly. Yes. A pause. The committee will release everything tomorrow. Every score. Every record. Every vote. I know, I said. That's not what worries me. Silence stretched between us. Then I added, softer. People don't wait for truth. They choose the version they like. Another pause. May I come see you? He asked. I closed my eyes. I wanted to say yes so badly it hurt. But I saw the cameras. The headlines. The way a single image could become 1,000 lies. No, I said. A beat. Not tonight. His voice didn't change. Is this because of what they're saying? It's because I don't want your name dragged through this because you happened to recognize me 5 years ago. My reputation has survived worse than gossip. Mine hasn't, I said before I could stop myself. Silence. Not cold. Just heavy. Then I will respect your decision. That hurt more than anger would have. Before he hung up, he added quietly, Adrian, don't mistake my patience for indifference. The call ended. I didn't sleep. The next day, the committee held a press conference. Everything was laid bare. Scores. Evaluations. Sealed records. Independent audit confirmation. Clean. Transparent. Undeniable. The accusations collapsed within hours. News outlets quietly corrected themselves. Social media moved on. The storm ended. Or so I thought. Because truth doesn't always fix what suspicion already broke. That evening, I left the building late. The hallway was nearly empty when I passed a partially open conference room door. Voices inside. I stopped. I feel bad for Lucian, one executive said. He's taking this too personally. Ever since he started looking for that young man years ago, a chair shifted. If he hadn't been so fixated, none of this would have happened. A sigh. That's why he keeps helping him now. Guilt does strange things to people. I froze. Guilt. The word didn't just land. It echoed. Again. And again. All the way home. Had I misunderstood everything? Was I not someone he chose to help, but someone he felt responsible for? A mistake he never corrected? A regret he couldn't let go of? Suddenly, every moment between us fractured into possibilities I had never considered. Kindness became obligation. Silence became distance. Care became compensation before I could stop myself. I made a decision I didn't fully understand. I typed a message. Thank you for everything. I think it's better if we stop here before either of us confuses gratitude with something else. My finger hovered. Then press send. Instant regret. But it was too late. Less than a minute later, his reply arrived. If that is truly what you want, I will respect it. But there is one truth I refuse to let you believe. I stared at the screen. My hands didn't move. I didn't reply. 3 days passed. No messages. No calls. On the 4th evening, someone knocked on the studio door. Mason, 2 coffee cups in hand. You're avoiding the wrong person, he said, handing me one. I blinked. What are you doing here? He gave a small, tired smile. Lucian didn't send me. He'd probably kill me for this. We walked without direction until the city noise softened into a nearby park. When we stopped under the maple trees, Mason exhaled slowly. Do you know the first thing Lucian asked me after I told him I was getting married? I shook my head. He asked if the guest named Adrian Hale was the same Adrian Hale he'd been searching for. My breath caught. Mason didn't stop. And when I said yes, do you know what he asked next? I couldn't speak. Mason looked at me. He asked if you looked happy. Silence. Not even the wind seemed to move. Not if you were single. Not if he still had a chance. Not if I approved. Just if you looked happy. My throat tightened. Mason's voice lowered. Adrian, I've known Lucian for over a decade. When he feels guilt, he apologizes once and moves on. A pause. What he's carried for you all this time isn't guilt. My heart pounded. Then what is it? I whispered. Mason looked past the trees toward the fading sky and said quietly, hope. A long silence followed. Then Mason added, almost like an afterthought, and Adrian, there's something else you should know. I turned toward him. His expression changed. Not sad. Not gentle. Serious. Lucian didn't stop searching for you 5 years ago. A pause. He stopped searching the day he found you. My phone vibrated in my pocket. Once, then again, unknown number. Incoming call. Mason looked at it, then at me, and said the words that made everything collapse. Mason's final words, hope, not guilt, wouldn't leave me. For a week, I replayed every moment with Lucian since the wedding. Not the grand gestures. The small ones. He never interrupted when I spoke about my mother. He never pushed when I asked for space. And after the wedding, he didn't chase me. He waited. Quietly. Patiently. None of that felt like obligation anymore. It felt like respect. And for the first time, I wondered if I had been protecting not my heart, but my fear. On Friday, our studio received an invitation from the East Harbor Foundation. A volunteer orientation before construction began. No press, no executives, just teachers, students, veterans, artists, and community members shaping the project together. My director insisted we go. This isn't our project anymore, she said. It belongs to them. The orientation was held in a renovated waterfront warehouse. No luxury staging, just folding tables, student sketches, and rough architectural models. Honest. Alive. And then I saw him, Lucian. No suit. No entourage. Just rolled sleeves, a volunteer badge, and a toolbox in one hand while stacking chairs with the other. He was helping an elderly teacher fix a broken projector when he finally looked up. Our eyes met. A pause. Then he walked over. Slow, careful, stopping just out of reach. I didn't expect you, he said. Neither did I. Silence settled between us. Then I spoke. Mason came to see me. His eyes closed briefly. A controlled breath. I thought he might. Were you angry? Only that I wanted to be the one to tell you. A faint, tired smile crossed my face. Then tell me now. Around us, the room kept moving. Hammering, laughter, paper models being taped together. Life continuing without waiting for us. Lucian looked at me. I didn't search for you out of guilt, he said quietly. I searched because after meeting you, everything I built suddenly felt incomplete. He paused. You made me question what leadership even means. Not power. Not success. Character. I didn't interrupt. When I couldn't find you, I accepted it. Some doors don't reopen. The wedding wasn't fate, it was timing. But it gave me one thing I never had. His voice softened. The chance to tell you that one ordinary night changed me more than I ever admitted. Something in my chest loosened. Then why let me walk away? I asked. His answer was almost a whisper. Because love that demands a response becomes pressure. And I didn't want to become that for you. Before I could answer, a small voice cut through the room. Mr. Ashford. A little girl ran up holding a collapsing cardboard model. The roof keeps falling. Without hesitation, Lucian knelt. That's a serious engineering problem, he said gravely. Good thing I know someone better at this than I am. His eyes flicked to me. Help me. I laughed before kneeling beside them. 30 minutes blurred into something effortless. We rebuilt walls, reinforced paper beams, turned a collapsing model into a working classroom. More children gathered. More problems appeared. More laughter followed. Without speaking, we fell into rhythm, like we had always known it. He inspired. I designed. They imagined. And the warehouse filled with something neither of us had planned. Belief. When the children finally left, the room quieted. I stood by the window. Boston Harbor shimmered under fading light. Lucian came beside me. No words. Just presence. Then I reached into my pocket. The faded photograph from the scholarship gala. I handed it to him. He froze slightly as he took it. I thought, I said softly, it shouldn't belong to only one of us anymore. His grip tightened. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then I stepped closer. This time, I didn't wait. I reached for his hand. He looked at me like the moment might break if he breathed too hard. I smiled. I can't promise where this goes. His voice barely carried. Neither can I. Our fingers intertwined. And this time, I said, we don't walk away from it alone. For the first time in 5 years, hope didn't stand on one side of the distance. It stood between us. And then, the warehouse lights flickered once, and the emergency door behind us slowly opened. Autumn slowly gave way to winter, and for the first time in years I found myself looking forward to the future instead of measuring it against the past. Lucian and I never rushed to define anything. We let it grow the way trust should, through ordinary mornings, shared work, and small choices that quietly became impossible to live without. We spent weekends at East Harbor Initiative schools, listening to teachers instead of assuming technology alone could fix everything. Sometimes painting classrooms with volunteers, sometimes staying late to help parents assemble furniture after events ended. Newspapers occasionally captured Lucian at official ceremonies, but never the moments that mattered most. Carrying folding tables after everyone left, driving elderly volunteers home in snowstorms, or sitting on classroom floors while children proudly explained drawings of future cities. Each time I saw him choose people over prestige, I understood more clearly why that single evening at Harbor Museum had stayed with him for so long. One Friday, we attended the opening of the first completed education center, where students, teachers, veterans, donors, and families filled the campus with noise and light. Cameras waited for Lucian at the entrance, but after answering a few questions, he quietly stepped away and spent nearly an hour with students instead, patiently encouraging a nervous girl presenting her first model. And in that moment, I realized the public version of him and the man I knew were the same. Later, as the celebration continued inside, Mason approached me with 2 cups of hot chocolate. Marriage had softened him, given him a calm I had never seen before, and we walked outside into falling snow until the noise faded. After a long silence, he finally said his husband had asked whether he regretted inviting me to their wedding, and I laughed because it was a dangerous question, but he only smiled and said it was the kindest decision he had ever made without realizing it. I asked if he truly meant that, and he nodded, explaining that for years he thought he had lost something irreplaceable, but seeing Lucian and me together gave him an answer he could finally accept. He had loved me, but always tried to shape me into a life he imagined, while Lucian simply became curious about the life I was building. His words landed without bitterness, only clarity, and I felt something in my chest loosen as he added that the difference between loving someone and truly seeing them was everything. Then he laughed softly, reminding me of the day our apartment flooded, and I had said disasters reveal character faster than success, and he said weddings did the same. We both laughed, and across the courtyard I saw Lucian finish speaking with students before instinctively looking for me. When our eyes met, that familiar warmth settled inside me completely. Mason followed my gaze, smiled, and told me to go because someone had been looking for me long before this wedding ever began. I thanked him, and he simply said he was glad we had both become who we were meant to be. As I walked back through the snow, Lucian closed the distance naturally, falling into step beside me as if we had always belonged there, asking if everything was all right. I smiled and said it was better than all right, and when he asked what had changed, I looked at the snow and said I used to think healing meant forgetting, but now I believed it meant thanking the past for leading you to the right person. He squeezed my hand gently, smiling in that quiet way that always steadied me. While behind us the celebration continued, children laughing inside the glowing center, volunteers packing the last supplies, and the first winter snow covering everything in silence. No one noticed the elderly scholarship director watching from the entrance with tears in his eyes, the same man who had seen our first meeting years ago at Harbor Museum, now whispering with a relieved smile that some promises really do survive time. Are you going to answer? Or are you going to find out why he never told you he already knew where you were? Nearly a year later, the Boston Harbor Museum hosted another scholarship gala, but this time I did not arrive as a volunteer clutching registration lists or wondering if anyone would remember my name. I arrived beside Lucian, greeting students whose futures were already beginning to take shape through the East Harbor Initiative. As the evening wound down, the museum director led everyone back to the same storage room that once held nothing but dusty donation boxes, now transformed into a permanent exhibit honoring volunteers whose quiet kindness had changed lives far beyond their own. Behind glass hung an old volunteer badge with my faded photo and a plaque that read, "Great futures often begin with ordinary kindness." I stood frozen as Lucian smiled softly and said, "I asked them to return what was never truly mine." Then, before students, volunteers, and friends, he reached into his pocket and opened a small velvet box. 5 years ago, I left this place thinking I had lost the chance to know the man who changed my life. A year ago, I stood at another man's wedding wondering if I would ever find the courage to speak the truth. Today, I only have one question left. Inside were two simple platinum rings. "Adrian Hale, will you spend the rest of your ordinary days building an extraordinary life with me?" My vision blurred as laughter, applause, and quiet tears filled the room, and I did not hesitate. "Yes," I whispered, smiling through tears. "1,000 ordinary days, a lifetime, if you'll have me." The room erupted as Lucian slipped the ring onto my finger and pressed his forehead gently to mine. Months later, our wedding took place in a quiet botanical garden with no spectacle. Only the people who had walked beside us from the beginning. Mason and his husband stood among the guests. The elderly scholarship director signed our marriage certificate as witness, and children from the education centers filled the air with laughter while volunteers embraced like family. Looking at them all, I finally understood the truth love had been teaching me all along. Fate does not reward those who wait for perfect timing, but those who choose kindness when no one is watching. And sometimes the person standing beside your greatest heartbreak is not there to witness your ending at all, but because he has been waiting years to become your beginning.